Ms. Gonzalez, do you think our schools are failing in this state? Are we doing an adequate job of educating our public school kids?
You know, I grew up through the public school system, and I'm very proud of our public schools, but I do think that we have to continue to advance our public schools. I think that we have to restore the cuts to education. I think that we have to account for enrollment growth. I think that we have to continue to implement a curriculum that I think, you know, part of what you said is correct. We need to have curriculum that helps students retain information and is really engages them in the production and creation of knowledge, right? I think that a lot of times when we have this test, it dehumanizes students to only learn to a test.
You're referring to the standardized testing, the accountability.
Yeah, to the STAR test. And so, you know, if you ask teachers across the state, I don't think any teachers like that test. And so how does it really impact our classroom and thus impact our students?
Well, neither do a lot of school boards. You may know, Mr. Bell, you've been president of the MAGNOLIA ISD trustees. I think more than 80% of school boards have passed a resolution opposing the STAR test, representing more than 80% of the students in the state. You are for or against the standardized testing that we now have in place?
I am opposed to the standardized testing the way it sets today. I am a believer that we need to have mastery of curriculum.
Right.
Demonstrated mastery.
So you're opposed, Ms. Gonzalez, you're opposed as well?
The way it is right now.
The way it sets today.
Yes.
Mr. Capriglione?
Like I said, I have daughters in 3rd grade and 2nd grade, and I've gone through and I've looked at the curriculum and what they're testing for, and I don't like the way that it's being done.
So we have 3 people opposed to the well, that's 3. Okay.
I think there might be a lot of different, the devil's in details. But
Well, what that means may differ.
Well, right. I mean, obviously, how you define standardized testing, just in the same way how you define school choice. An issue I want to ask you about, Mr. Capriglione. You know, we have a new chair of public education in the Senate, Dan Patrick. We don't yet have a new chair of public ed in the House. We will at some point here in the next couple of weeks. But the Senate chair, Mr. Patrick, has made no secret of his intention to push a school choice a plan, whatever that is. In fact, he declined to say a couple of weeks ago. He said, I'll talk about it when I've got the details filled in. Lieutenant Governor has said he's generally speaking for school choice or vouchers. We know the governor is as well. How do you feel about the need for school choice as it relates to your district?
I am in favor of school choice in general, and I'm glad you mentioned in district, because we might have to come up with a solution that's different in each area.
Yeah, Mr. Bell's district, for instance, in your district, we have very different points of view on what's good for those kids. Yeah.
For me, I think, you know, what we want to do ultimately is promote a quality education, and we can do that by promoting parental responsibilities, supporting parental rights, make sure that, again, we focus on local control. I haven't seen, there isn't necessarily a voucher bill, but...
Well, there's no legislation.
There's no legislation, but I'll tell you, whatever it is, I'd be making sure that, one, that there's accountability to the taxpayers, but at the same time also being able to protect private schools and homeschooling from excessive regulation.
Right. Now, you know, Mr. Capriglione, one of the concerns people express about a school choice plan in a broad sense is that these are public tax dollars that are being essentially moved out of the public education system. What about that?
Well, in general, I'm not in favor of taking public dollars and giving it to private individuals, especially without some of the ideas, which is with no accountability whatsoever. But, you know, there is this concept of tax credits, which I think could be used, which would basically be used to say, okay, listen, if you have an abatement on your property taxes if you have school kids, but if you go to public schools, then you don't receive that education. And but that's going to be an issue, because then what will happen is people will want to regulate where those dollars go, and they should. And how much we're going to do that, I think, is a concern.
You're not a big fan of regulation?
No.
I get the impression pretty quickly. Now, Mr. Bell, you're from a more rural district, and it is often said that rural Republicans may find rare common ground with Democrats on the school choice issue. And this may be the problem for advocates of school choice, is that the rurals and the Democrats may come together to prevent such a plan. How do you feel about it as it relates to your district?
You know, I think the first thing you have to get around is the question of the fact that we as Texans have a constitutional requirement to fund public education. And in the district, I think the biggest challenge that you find within the public school system is not so much is there a willingness to have the conversation. It's more on the private side, where they want to have the conversation without having the obligations that go along to the public side.
Sort of to Mr. Capriglione's point, you know, the question of what are the private schools obligated to do that the public schools are obligated to do.
So, you know, several of the superintendents in the district have made the statement that, you know, while they're not, while they feel like it's probably detrimental, if everybody has to play on a level playing field,
then maybe they'd be entertained.
Then it changes the nature of the game. But if I'm in a private school, if I'm sending my kids, by the way, went to public school. But if I'm sending my kids to a private school, I'm sending them because of the uniquenesses that the private sector has to offer in terms of curriculum and other aspects. So,
well, Mr. Capriglione walks in disposed in favor of school choice without knowing the details. You walk in opposed or in favor of, without knowing the details?
I am, the way I've heard it, I would be opposed to the system the way I've heard it. But certainly I am, much more conversation has to be had.
You're going to keep an open mind?
I think my district wants me to keep an open mind.
Right.